Hi, I'm Diane Harris with Quiltmaker magazine, and today we're going to learn how to make a Dresden plate. The Dresden plate block can look a little bit intimidating, but I can assure you that once you understand the mechanics, it's really easy to do, and they're so much fun, they might even be addictive. So the first thing we're going to do is cut the blades for our Dresden plate, and the easiest way to cut those is from a strip. So today we're going to be working with the 5.5 inch strip, and you'll either be using a template from a pattern that you have, or you can use a commercial template. If you're using a template out of a pattern, what I did was cut out the paper and then use tape to tape the paper to template plastic, and then just cut the whole thing out. So this is paper that's stuck to template plastic for a nice sturdy template, or you can use a commercial template. So the way you cut these is by lining up the line here at the top and then the bottom of the template here. And so I'm using the 5.5 inch line because this is a 5.5 inch strip, and that's the size of the blade I need for today. So then you'll use your ruler or your rotary cutter and a mat, and you'll cut along here and then along here, and then each time you rotate the template and you just keep moving down your strip to cut all of your templates. So let me kind of show you how that works. This is how they look. So you can see you just cut them one right after another. So there you go. So you'll end up with all these different blades. And depending, you might have blades in 2 different fabrics, or you might have a scrappy look, but you'll go by your pattern according to which fabrics you use. So then the first thing you want to do once you have these blades is to prepare them on the sewing machine by making them into the pointed wedge for the Dresden plate. So you fold in half with the right sides together. And what you're going to do is take this to the sewing machine and sew 1/4 inch from the wide end right along here. So here I've done it with dark thread. In reality, you would use matching thread, but I did dark thread so that you could see it today. And you do want to shorten up your stitch length to very tiny, like 1.8 millimeters or so, or maybe 20 stitches to the inch. Really tiny, because that's not a very long distance, so you want the stitches tiny so they don't come out. And when I do that, I usually chain sew a whole bunch of these at once. So you get these happy little flags going. So I have all of those, and then I'll cut them apart for the next little step, which is trimming. And the trimming is really important. And what you want to do, this is the raw edges over here. And so you want to trim from this side with the fold. And so you're going to trim just a tiny little triangle off of there like so. And it's a little better, let me get another one to show you. Rather than cutting at this angle that you would normally think of, it's better to cut at an angle so that your triangle is a little longer and skinnier, and you'll see why in just a minute. So you want to trim them all, get that little triangle off there. So then this is what you end up with. So the next thing to do, and this is again a really important step, is you're going to take your fingernail and you're going to press that seam open with your fingernail so that it really stays. See how if you use your fingernail instead of just your finger, it stays much better. And then you're going to turn this right sides out. And I grabbed a different scissor for this next part because a really pointed scissors here is not so good. So you want a scissors that's a little more blunt, or a point turning tool, and you want to very gently push that point out. And you'll have matching threads so that you won't get those little dark threads there like I am on this sample. So a word of caution here, if you push too hard with a pointy object, you can go right through the end there. And if you go through the tip, then that blade is usually ruined. So you want to trim them all up. Then you're going to take them to, or flip them inside out, right sides out, and then you'll take it to the iron and you'll press. And usually I just eyeball to get this seam right in the middle. The larger the blade is, the more difficult it is to eyeball that in the middle. So if you feel really uncomfortable eyeballing that, you can fold this in half and make a tiny little crease in the center, again with your fingernail, and that way you have a benchmark for where you can center your seam. All right, so now we're getting to the really fun part, where you're going to sew the blades together. So you want to start with a couple of blades, and what you want to do is match them up here at the top, at the pointed end. You're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way down here. You want to leave your stitch length pretty short, down to 1.8 millimeters. And I start sewing. I sew about 3 stitches in. Let me get a little pointer here so you can see. About 3 stitches in, and then I sew back off, and then I complete my seam all the way down. And that way, that back stitching allows you to come right up here and trim those threads off even right there. And I don't worry about that coming undone, because you're going to applique this down, and there's never going to be any stress put on this seam. It's different than a lot of seams in quilting. No stress on this ever, so that's plenty to do that. If you're making a block where the fabrics alternate like this, each time you sew a pair together, you want to be sure that you put the same fabric on the left. Otherwise, you end up with things in the wrong order. And that can be fixed, but it's just better to remember to sew with the same one on the left each time. Okay, so for the sunshine quilt, which you can see behind me, they alternate fabrics, and it takes 11 of the blades. So you sew 5 pairs together, and then you add 1 more. And then, let me show you on another. I take an iron at this point, and this iron isn't actually hot, it's just for demonstration. But you want to press all of those seams in one direction. That is really the best way to do it, I've found. So you press everything in one direction. Okay, so back to our half sunshine here. So you actually need a center. You need to cover up this part right here. And the way that I have found I really like to do this is to use heat-resistant template plastic. And I make my template from the pattern, and then I put it on the wrong side of the fabric, and I cut out about 3/8 of an inch outside of it. And you don't actually have to draw around the circle, but I did that so that you could see what I was doing. Then you want to just take some strong thread and a needle, and by hand do a running stitch all the way around that circle. And then I have another example where I have finished that running stitch. So I'm going to tuck this back in here so I can show you. So I tuck this back in here, and then what you're going to do is pull up those stitches and pull that up tight all the way around the circle. We're not quite in the middle here, but you get the idea. So I pull that up tight, and then I'll take this to my iron, and because the template plastic is heat resistant, I can actually press this like so, and it'll just press over so nicely, just perfectly. And then I can loosen it a tad, pop this out, and everything is pressed under real nicely and ready to applique. So then you would lay this on here, placing it according to your pattern. And I have found that I really, to applique this down, I really like just using a machine straight stitch with matching thread, which I have an example here. This is really my preferred method, just a machine straight stitch and thread that matches this fabric. Just go all the way around and overlap your stitching just by a tad at the end, and you're good to go. So there's your completed Dresden plate. Here's one that's real scrappy, and here's one with every other that would be for the quilt, the sunshine quilt. And then you will applique this to the background, And again, you can hand applique it, or you can use invisible thread and some kind of a zigzag. But I really like just using a machine straight stitch, and here I would just use sort of a medium yellow thread, and I would sew right on top of there going all the way around. So that is the basics of how you do a Dresden plate block.